If you assume that the only place to walk is on a footpath, and you only walk upon footpaths, then you guarantee that the only place that people will walk will be on footpaths. If, on the other hand, you decide to walk in another direction, if you decide to walk in any direction, if you see that every direction is open for you to walk in, then you invest in freedom and you invest in choice and you invest in a world that is made better for all people to walk in. One of the theories about how we became bipedal is that it was in order to better display our genitalia. Although I think that such theories probably say more about the theoreticians than they do about our ancient ancestors. Well, all of them are maybes. Even the people who advance them and say, I prefer this one, they still say, but it's a maybe, you know. So, in fact, it's probably a confluence of all of these things, little bits coming together, having to use your hands and think about using your hands. That causes you to have to solve problems. The increased blood flow to the brain, causing increased development to the brain. Also, the forward planning needed by having a view over the landscape, a contemplation of your landscape, a contemplation of the sense of place. That led inevitably to walking. I mean, once you stand up, the next step is to walk. I'll introduce myself, pause, then go into the history of walking. Right. It's often the ancient Greeks who are claimed as the originators of modern walking. But the Greeks were certainly influenced in this, as in so many matters, by the Egyptians. The Egyptians, arguably, derived much of their culture from a much more ancient race. And the knowledge of this culture now comes down to us largely through the realms of myth and legend. Well, the Parsifals, 750 AD, thereabouts, they were a group who took it upon themselves to seek the cup of Christ, the Holy Grail. And I suppose what's interesting about them is that they relocated the site of the pilgrimage from a fixed object in the landscape, a fixed position, to a movable object. They would follow the signs from God of where the cup was, or where the Grail could be found, only to reach that point and find that the place itself was another sign to another place where the cup could be found. And I suppose this eternal seeking has some resonance with the Taoists of ancient China, for the search for immortality, conveying immortality upon the seeker, because it is, if the destination is immortality, and the search is the destination, the search is immortality. You see? The idea of walking as we know it today is a relatively new one. It requires a technologically advanced society with the resources to free up time so that people can walk as a recreational exercise. If you look at the situation this later on, they took the notion of the flaneur, which was basically a bourgeois notion, a wealthy idler wandering the streets without aim, merely to sort of, I suppose, satisfy his own curiosity, but an aimless curiosity. Well, the situation is they wanted to make this into a political act, which they did by introducing certain parameters, setting a set of rules which would, by following them, would take you into places in the city that you wouldn't see otherwise. And of course the constraints would allow different maps to be made up, to be conjured, shall we say. So rather than it being a geographical map, you've now got a different map. It's a map of the mind, it's a map of cultural advances, of revolutionary movements, of artistic ideas, of sexual freedoms, of personal triumphs. You would have a different map, which is in itself, is a work of art in a way, but it's a work of art that can be used. The walking revivalists, they were, I suppose, a reaction to the Situationists as well as inspired by them. They were inspired by this sort of radical new concepts of urban exploration, of psychogeography, the mixture of artistic endeavour and political act tied up in walking. But what the revivalists did was they took those theoretical frameworks and added to them perhaps what they perceived as the authenticity of walking from a distant past. They melded these two together, the theoretical, political underpinnings of the Situationists and academia of the 60s with a certain sort of mythic, spiritual idea of real walking, authentic walking. And that's what the 60s revivalists were seeking. They were by no means a homogeneous group. There were differences amongst them. Some were, as I say, more earthy, more earthbound, looking for the pathways and trying to feel the tread of the feet of the ancients. Others were more spiritual, sort of wanted to find the aura, the aura of the path, the way of the path. Indeed, some of them sought paths which hadn't been created yet. So the countryside wasn't just a place absent, where human beings were absent. It was a place where they were absent at present, but they had been, throughout history, had bestrode this landscape. The residual effect of the 60s walking revival were felt right up to the 1980s. When Margaret Thatcher came to power and the Conservative government of the 1980s, there was an increase and an encouragement towards consumerism, commodification, privatisation. There was a deliberate attempt to decimate British industry, and indeed it was successful. The corollary effect of the decimation of British industry was that the sites upon which these industries stood, these factories existed, gradually fell into decay. It was into these spaces that had been created by the very government which the revivalists themselves were antipathetic to. It was into these spaces that they moved. They took ownership of them. They sought out new ways of walking throughout this deserted, somewhat apocalyptic landscape of the inner cities during the 1980s. These people inspired our generation to discover what walking could be. Foremost amongst those was Donald Finch, Jack Sprout, Jane Carter. But out of all of them, of course, preeminently and the key figure is Anton Vegas. Anton Vegas was born in Worthing in Sussex on the south coast of England. His father was a travelling salesman, so he was rarely at home, and his mother, by all accounts, seems to have been more focused on bringing up his 4 sisters. It was his grandmother with whom he had the tighter familial bond. Other than that, he seems to have been an outsider in his own family. He was fascinated from an early age by living archaeology. In fact, he's reputed to have said he wanted to live in history. And some people have said that it was this attitude that made him want to walk everywhere. It was clear that he was a talented walker, but his talent was never nurtured. It wasn't encouraged by anybody in his family. He didn't lack self-motivation, but he lacked inspiration. In fact, it wasn't until he met Rose that he had anybody who inspired him. Rose Trelawney moved to Worthing from Cornwall when Anton was in the final year of his secondary school, and they met and they became sweethearts, and after he left school in 1964 they became engaged. Their relationship coincided with the great walking revival of the 60s, and they found themselves right in the middle of it. More than anyone, Rose Trelawney could see Anton's potential. She nurtured him, she encouraged him, and she was, without doubt, the most significant relationship in his life. They were somewhere on the path between Ditchling, Beacon and Lewis, and they were discovered, there was a walker, Mr. Sharp, who discovered them, and in his statement to police, he said he thought they were some sort of modern artwork, performance art. But when he got closer, he could see that they were covered from head to foot in blood, you know, almost as if somebody had painted them. She died from a pulmonary hematoma. A blood vessel had ruptured in her lung. It must have been a horrific way to die, very messy. They were alone at the time, and there was nowhere to go for help. As soon as Rose was buried, Anton disappeared. That was the turning point in his life. After that, he was nomadic.
He maybe tries to blend in, but maybe not everyone would spot him, but for me, he stands out in the crowd. I first met Anton at the Stewards' enclosure in Henley. I think that they just thought that he was supposed to be there and he belonged, and he carried it off. Yeah, I introduced myself to him, and we just started talking really, and we just talked and talked for ages, and he suggested that we went for a walk along the river, which we did. Yeah, we were both a bit drunk by then. Well, I was drunk, and anyway, we just kept walking and talking and walking and talking until, yeah, kind of before I knew what was happening, we were at the west coast of Scotland, and it was August time.
And then, out of the blue, I got a call from her, and she said that she was in Scotland on the family estate up there, and that I had to meet this man who she'd met. Now, Selina meeting a man was not unusual, but there was something about the way she said it that suggested that this man was somebody I had to meet. I was working at the time. I simply couldn't afford to go. She offered to pay, but perhaps pride ruled that out for me. Anyway, the very next day, as luck would have it, the very next day, I was made redundant. And I got a bit of a redundancy packet, rented out my house, went straight up to Scotland, to Selina, and I thought we'd be there for maybe, 2 or 3 weeks, maybe a month at the outset. I wasn't to know that we were going to spend the next 4 years together. We walked through the Highlands for the next couple of months, and we were talking a lot about pilgrimages. And it was then, I think, we decided to go on the Santiago de Compostela in January '96. We went there, and it was there that we met Trip, Ben Ross.
Yeah, I just kept bumping into them as we went, and Well, quite like. Then I got a little bit sort of concerned because, so we just keep bumping into each other just off places. Yeah, I was sure that they were following me. I'm sure they were, until I kind of realised that I was getting there after they were. And I did think at one point that they might be trying to guess where I was going and getting there first. And in fact, I tried really hard, just to not be where I thought they were going to be, but we'd still bump into each other sort of somehow. And I tried not to be there. So I kind of, I kind of guess that's kind of where I really met. And then I don't quite know when we first started walking together, really, but we just did for the next 4 years, really.
Yeah, Orange Wednesday. Well, there were a group who were really into swimming in icy rivers, and they were really hard, bad, mean in plain English. They would just be these spots, orange spots in these vast landscapes. Pretty surreal, really. And then there was Anton with a day pack, same scenery. And when I figured out that he spoke English, because my Russian is not quite as good as my English, so I could talk to him properly, and I asked him whether he wasn't afraid to die. He said no, because you possibly wouldn't let me die. And I thought, this guy is either mad or is onto something. And I knew that he believed in the walk and that the walk would provide him with everything he needed, or in this case, we needed. Running out of money, no problem. Money would appear somewhere. No water, no transport. Whatever happened, something happened. Wouldn't be a problem. You grow close to each other, it's not something disposable. It will, and even if we weren't to walk with each other any longer for circumstances, unforeseen circumstances, whatever it might be, but it'd still be there in spirit.
I was taking a shortcut through quite a rough housing estate. I'd been out for the day and had enough, so I thought I'd go home, but rather than circumnavigating the estate, I was going to go through it. And this is an estate that is quite notorious for burglary and also for what happens to burglars if they are caught. And it's kind of a maze, really. All the houses are facing outwards, and there's this cluster of back gardens that have got fences of different heights, and it's really difficult to navigate. And I just dropped down the fence in this particular garden, and I could sense that there were people there. I couldn't see anyone at that point, but I could just feel them. I couldn't hear them, I could just feel their presence. And I was just about to nip back over to the fence when I said, "Are you lost?" And there was this pause, and then somebody said, "No, we've just stopped for sandwiches." All these lights started going off, and you could hear the dogs barking, and I could just imagine this group of massive skinheads with tattoos reaching for axes and coming out to chop us up. And then everyone just stopped laughing, stum. And we all got back into the zone, and we were just out of there. And it was lucky they had me with them because I could show them out of this maze. And we ended up going back to my house and stayed up all night drinking and listening to music and chatting. And I heard about the trip to Venice, and Jay asked me whether I wanted to go with them. He asked me the next morning. He said that he'd spoken to everyone in the group and they were all cool with it, and they were going up to Sheffield to check out this industrial site up there. And I'm not usually into groups, but this group was totally different. It was like I felt comfortable with them straight away. It was like they were family somehow, you know. And that was it. I just packed my bags and off we went.
We'd heard about each other, of course, because that was the time when all the industrial scenes were opening up in late 80s. I suppose it was assumed right from the beginning that we'd collaborate, but it was never spoken. We just started walking together. So that's how collaborations do start. You probably know there are all kinds of old passageways going back to Roman times, maybe before, under London, and there are streams, small rivers, everywhere. Now, I went in by an entrance in an underground station that's been disused now, and I found my way down to a certain passage. I'd been there before. At this junction, it goes around in a kind of circular way, so you can't see what's coming towards you and you can't hear. And suddenly there was this figure opposite me, and that was Howard Stanley. If I had to compare him to Anton, I'd say yes, at his age, he was the better walker of the two. I knew within a couple of minutes that H had to meet Anton. So that was what made me start to try and track down Anton Vegas again. And that was how I met Howard Stanley.
Well, Howard was an amazing walker, maybe one of the best. No, it just doesn't really feel I really want to talk about it, because it seems like it's said and done. It's just like this void there, and I'd rather not think about it, to be honest with you. Yeah, a lot of groups get into urban exploration to sort of please their own egos. But the thing with Baseman was there was nothing like that. He never did anything he did for praise. He once was part of a group before he sort of joined the Nine, who was really into like exploring hardcore, dangerous environments, and they succeeded like that. But it wasn't really his thing, really. He wanted to be his own man. He wanted to do it for his own experience. Nevertheless, he found a place within the Nine with his expertise and exploring his own realm that he was particularly interested in. And he was really, really good at it. Really good.
Well, yeah, you're right. I mean, I knew about these places, you know, they were kind of like semi-mythical. But the fact was, news came in on my network that they were going to be doing some major construction work on Venice town. And the rumour was that this would open up some access points to, yeah, the vast areas of catacombs that are in the bedrock there, people just aren't aware of. I mean, there's a whole world under there. Now, typically the access points are constrained to being inside properties, like the Doge's palaces, for example, you know, guard dogs, security, etc. It's a no-go. So when I heard about this, well, this was like a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And so I kind of got my kit ready, waited on the signal, and then I was on the first plane out there.
As soon as I sat down, he started hitting on me. And it was one of those airlines where it was totally booked up, there was nowhere else to sit. So I had to sit next to him for the duration. He seemed nice enough, and he was funny, affable kind of person, so it was easier to turn him down. But we did eventually start talking about walking. And I could tell that there was something about the place that he wasn't willing to give up. Didn't push him on it. I just invited him to come and meet the group and come out walking with us.
I wanted a day to settle, and I wanted a day to scope access. So on the third day, I met her and she introduced me to the rest of the group, and that was the first time that I got to meet them properly. yeah, I'd gone in there a light. I mean, I lived my life for these sort of opportunities, and you know, then to find out there was no access point in, I was floored.
I think it was the third day that that he came and found us, but his attitude had totally changed. You know, there was a seriousness about him, maybe even slightly moody, and the spark had gone. And we were walking, and there was a moment where Bob went up to him and he stood in front of him and looked him right in the eyes. And then, it's really odd, he kind of looked past him and got this, "Oh, that's interesting" look on his face, and walked past him to this grate by the wall, and we were in this very quiet square where there was no one around, and we were all standing in front of this grate in the wall, and Bob said to Bass, "I think this is what you've been looking for," and Bass's attitude totally changed. He went to the grate and he moved it to the side, and without looking back at us, he just went straight through, and we had no idea what was going on. You know, this was something we didn't know anything about, but we all just followed him, and it was just amazing that Bob had just found it without knowing about it, without looking for it. It just kind of appeared. There it was, and I can't begin to describe how amazing that experience was.
Walking with Anton just urged you to tap into this state of being, and without knowing, you would just be invisible. You would just end up invisible. And sometimes you would be surprised that guards or people working in these areas wouldn't sniff you out, but they wouldn't. You would just be the most normal thing in the world. Like, you would belong to the place.
So it's not a case of actually becoming physically invisible, it's a case of becoming psychologically invisible. People just don't see you.
Yeah, they just don't recognize you as being a trespasser, infiltrator. They would just not see you within that role. It's as if you would just blend into the landscape, as if you belonged there.
And it wasn't long after that Bob started talking to us about the seventh dimensional walking, and after that everything changed.
It talks about the first dimension of walking being a state where you have the intent to go and do something. I want to go to the shops, I need food. Pretty simple, but you're not moving, so it's your first dimension. Second dimension is you become mobile and you move from where you are now to your destination to achieve a very specific goal. The third dimension is where things are less constrained and you're still starting at the same place, but your ending point now multiplies out an infinite number of times, both on a linear plane, but also the up and down. When we reach the fourth dimension, we start to consider other inputs, historical facts and figures. Why was this building put together? What was it made from? Who built it and why did they build it? What went on here? What will happen to this building? What will happen in future? Who will come here? What will it be used for? That's another layer, that's the fourth dimension. Fifth dimension starts to get into our conscious. It starts to look at how we see ourselves reflected from our environment. Our fears and our desires start to shape the way that we see these things around us. And as we move into the sixth dimension, we start to draw more on subconscious, on the demons and the angels and the symbols that are unique to all humans. They're inside us, and it's a voice that can say, here we see an angel in the clouds. The trick with all of this is not to get too hung up on which dimension you're in at any particular time, because the fact is that none of these dimensions exist. They exist in a book, and they're a great framework for understanding things, but the freedom that you find by transcending to the 7th dimension is that you can exist in all of these planes at the same time, and they bleed into each other. The 7th dimension is about walking into the unknown and embracing it.
And we mixed it up, that was the whole point. We would use everything that we could to make our walks as meaningful, as unusual, maybe as threatening and exciting as possibly possible.
Well, anything can be a map. You know, I mean, literally anything. This carpet could be a map. You know, if you want to superimpose it over a place, or if you want to use it forget about the place. You don't know the place you're going to. You use it to give you an idea of the type of place you want to go to, or when you get to a place, how you're going to explore that. Anything can be a map, really. We used, as I said, carpets, wallpapers. A lot of these wallpapers from the 1960s make excellent maps, actually. Difficult to come across now, since we've got pastel shades on the walls, which aren't very good maps, I have to say. As you say, electrical diagrams. Remember, a map is not just a map of 2 dimensions. It can be a map of 1 dimension, of the single line moving through space. I mean, one time we had a particular map. I think it had come from a recipe book, really. It was something to do with the sauce. And we made a map out of these various instructions, and we thought, we'll do this. We imposed it upon, I think it's sort of about 10 square miles of Yorkshire Dales in winter. And we imposed this walk on there. Well, it was dreadful, really, in a wonderful sort of way. We ended up stuck in snow for a day and a half, because, of course, the walk, whereas when we used the same map and did it in the centre of Manchester, 3 days later, we ended up in the pub at the end of it. And this was the same map, the same walk, only moved from the Yorkshire Dales, not 25 miles away, to Manchester, an entirely different experience with the same pathway.
And that was the whole point, to make all these events appear. Unpredictability is a really good part in the walk. Well, it was a little bit with Donald. It was as if he wouldn't even apply these techniques. He would just be there. It was as if he impersonated that state of being to a much more extended degree. I can't really put it into words, but it was as if he wouldn't actively get into that headspace. He would just be it. But if you want to understand Donald or Anton, respectively, you really should have a look at Crowley's writings.
I knew Alex Streley when his systems were completed. He was the great magician, walker, whatever, of his time. And he passed it to me. I'm not as good as he was, but I have the full picture. I have the full picture.
Walking, magical act of creation. Well, as the I or you, the human instrument, with its infinite cosmic capacity to link between all worlds and all planes, move through this walking experience. We are, in fact, as we envision, we are creating and experiencing the entire cosmos with each step we take. It is a wonderful and powerful thing, and we have only a slight clue as to the full power and scope of our being. We must wake up to this. Walking is a way of exercising this power and bringing into life, through ambulatory activity, the full scope of our cosmic inheritance. different.
The alchemists had a term for what they did. They called it the great work. Now, it was commonly understood, this is the transmutation of base metals into gold. However, there is a deeper meaning, I believe, behind this. It is the transmutation of the self, the transmutation of baser instincts, of outmoded thought patterns, of erroneous behaviour into something higher, more pure. The transmutation of the self, in other words, into a state of perfection. Now, the alchemists got the term from the Greeks, and the Greeks got the terms from the Egyptians, and the Egyptians, in turn, it seems, got that term from an older civilization, a nomadic people who passed through the Egyptian lands and are recorded as being known as workers of great magics, beholden to no sovereign, but sovereign unto themselves. The Egyptians recorded that these people were on the Great Walk. Now, it's my belief that the great work is the Great Walk.
Yes, that is it. And the basic doctrine of the Guild of Wayfarers, of the Great Walk, is that you are your own master. In classical times, they were interested in what they called the prime mover, by which they meant someone who controls their own destiny. Your will makes you do what you want, not someone else's will. That was their central and prime doctrine. Now, the Great Walk became the Great Work under the alchemists, and they turned it into something different. But that's what's behind it. Anarchy, if you like.
But do you mean by anarchy, chaos and bloodshed?
Perhaps that's what people say it would be. Who knows? But look at what we've got now. Look around. Conflict, wars, bloodshed. And it all comes from this. One group of people group together and say, my way is better, I know better, I'm going to have power over you. And if you tell the oppressed of the world, who are always the people who don't have the power, that they must play by the rules of the powerful, then you are taking away from them the only tool they have to free themselves.
Well, I suppose the 9 in more than one way lived in symbiosis, like you would, because of the nature of the walks or the tasks that we set to resolve in a weird way. We would of course really have to tap into each other's not only expertise but also feel, what would be the word, into an intuitive way. And that would be actually most fascinating, because at the end of the day you wouldn't really know where you would like get that knowledge or that expertise from. It was really like learning by doing, because it was just like mixing a lot of colors into one pot and end up with a big black mass. This is how it would work.
So you're saying that the group was like a big black mass?
Well, not in a negative sense, no, but like in an additive sense, yeah, definitely, for sure. I think they made the most of it, in that they were all really, really extreme in what they were doing and in what they pursued, together or as individuals. They were really, really, really extreme in what they pursued.
Look at what we did. we flew to New Zealand to walk on a specific number of footpaths. Now, they were exceedingly nice footpaths, but they were 23,000 miles away, and we had to fly there to do this. Now, some may think that this is not a very efficacious way to use the world's resources. I mean, after all, there isn't a country on Earth that doesn't have ground where you can walk on it. And we didn't just do it there. We travelled all around the world, walking wherever we could.
What happened in North Korea?
Well, that's another story.
So you're not going to tell us anything about what happened in North Korea?
No, I couldn't, no. No.
There was a standing joke between me and Bass about who was going to discover Atlantis first. The joke being that Atlantis had sunk. It's a sunken island, and that would be, you know, kind of quite ironic, really, to sort of, you know, to find a sunken island, especially if you're on foot and walking. And then sort of the irony being that what's ironic becomes kind of fairly real, you know, kind of fairly sort of tangible, really. And so, in that respect, what we kind of started to think was that the irony can actually become a reality in that way, and that one of us, you know, kind of would, you know, we started believing that actually one of us would find, you know, sort of Atlantis, which would just be, you know, kind of plausible and brilliant, really. So that was what we were thinking about. You know, it was about sort of who would sort of find Atlantis first, really. Yeah, so that's what we kind of. That's where we kind of sort of going with that, really. I think it hasn't been found yet, has it?
Not as far as I'm aware, no.
Are you sure? Can somebody check that? Because that wouldn't be very funny.
Can we get
It felt as though we were following this wave of energy as it receded north, almost like a migration, like we were migrating north. And Oslo was as far as it got.
Well, it was meant to be just a routine stroll. I can't even remember how we ended up there. But what happened next was that we just ended up splitting out into different groups, and Bob and Donald just disappeared.
It was almost like it had run out of petrol. There was this momentum that was keeping everyone going, but we kind of found ourselves in Oslo and everyone had run out of energy a little bit, and people started to pull back into groups that they felt most comfortable with, maybe to have a bit of a rest, if you like. And things just didn't feel the same. There wasn't the same sense of purpose that people wanted to carry on. It was like everyone was tired and maybe a bit homesick and couldn't find that in each other anymore.
When Anton disappeared, the group just fell apart. I think people realised, they took a little while to realise, but then they got it, that Anton was what was holding that group together. And without him, the group simply fragmented.
It was just a weird atmosphere. It felt cold. We split into little groups, wandered off, explored. From time to time we saw each other in our groups, but we never kind of gelled back together. And I think some of us found it quite threatening that things were just unravelling in that way.
Did you find it threatening?
No.
Why not?
You know, I mourn the passing of the group and of the collective, but yeah, I'm kind of alone in that way.
There was a point in the group where it really did feel like a family, and we were all really close. And you know, there were people that you were more close to than other people, but it was self-sustaining, you know, it was its own ecology. and maybe it just ran its course as people grew, because that's what happened on the walks, is that we all learned more about ourselves and each other, and maybe there wasn't a need for it anymore. It wasn't the vessel that it used to be.
So do you think that H's disappearance was just a catalyst for that?
It was fragmenting. The group was fragmenting in Oslo, and H's disappearance was the final straw. I mean, there was so much disagreement about what happened to him that it had just gone to a point where we couldn't return from it. You knew she was having an affair with H. Yeah. I think everybody in the group knew about it, but nobody wanted to say anything because they thought it would harm the group, you know, fracture the group if everyone started to talk about it. I get the impression she was trying to create this inner circle with her and Lockie and Anton and H, which was rubbish really, because Anton was the inner circle. I think Lockie just played along with it for Selena's sake, and H could see through it, and Anton really didn't give a shit. He was the inner circle. And I think we all thought that if we just ignored it, their affair would stop and things could go back to normal the way that they always were. We could all just relax. I think that's what happened. I think things did stop, which is why I don't think H was the kind of person that would throw himself off a cliff for a woman, and he was much too good a walker to lose his footing. And I had no evidence to support it, but I really knew that Anton was responsible for H's disappearance. He was the last person to see him, which is why I confronted him with it.
We'd been following the coast path down and arrived in South Devon. We ended up in Brixham, so we set up camp there, and H suggested that we went for a night walk around Berry Head. Anton went with him and Jim followed. I know Jim came back probably about 2 o'clock in the morning because he was sharing a tent with Ben, and I heard them laughing together when they got back. And the next thing I know, my tent was being unzipped in the morning, and they hadn't come back. H and Anton were still missing, so we woke everyone up and we went to look for them.
Primal, you know, there was a real feeling. I got out of the tent, saw this, and a number of people that I didn't know what was going on at the time. It was very difficult to get any information. Of course, when I found out, I was completely in shock, because it's difficult to assimilate that information. At the time, it was difficult to assimilate it whilst trying not to draw conclusions immediately, which came to mind, which I alluded to early on. I was trying not to make assumptions or read into the situation what might have happened.
I called the police about an hour and a half after searching, and they responded really quickly. Helicopter, Coast Guard, but nothing.
And you know, we kind of slowly just kind of grouped together, kind of gave up really, and you know, we sort of drifted off found ourselves back in Brixham, all kind of in the cafe, sort of sitting there, and then don't know, it all kicked off really, shouting, accusations, counter accusations, more shouting.
Red just started tearing into Bob, accusing him of murdering H, saying he'd felt threatened by him since Venice, and Bob just sat there, said nothing, did nothing. And it was like he wasn't even there. And then Lena started defending Anton, and Base started defending Red, and Don just started laughing, and Trip just got up at some point and walked out, and the whole thing just fell apart over breakfast. And in the end, Anton got up and he settled the bill for breakfast, and he just walked out. Lena, Lockie, Pacer and me, we followed him, and it got dark, and Lockie dropped out and took Lena with him. I think she knew that if there had been anything between her and Anton, by then it was over. I followed for another 12 hours, as much out of my friendship with Pacer than for anything else. But I was also curious to see what he would do, if he would say anything. But I think I knew it was over. I knew from that first moment on that morning on the cliff when I saw him, I knew that it was over. Pacer carried on for another 24 hours. And even then, he said that it wasn't that he stopped walking, it was just that Anton outpaced him, left him behind. And you cannot imagine the stamina endurance of Anton. He'd been awake for 70 hours, he'd been walking for almost 40 hours, maybe even more. And who knows when he stopped? Maybe he didn't, maybe he's still going.
I've got my suspicions. They're not founded on evidence. So, in a way, for me to tell you what I thought had happened to him would be unfair, because I wouldn't be able to justify it. Given the fact that this is a public interview, I wouldn't be able to justify it. And indeed, I might leave myself open to criticism for expressing an opinion on that.
So are you saying that you would rather not comment?
Well, I will comment to the degree that I think that whatever happened to him, the people who are responsible, they know who they are, and I believe they know that I know who they are. I believe.
There's more than one?
Well, I used they in order not to specify on whether it's one person or more than one. I'm saying it could be one or it could be more than one. Again, I don't want to specify because my feeling, my belief, isn't backed up by any real evidence. But it's a strong belief. It's not to me, it doesn't seem so much of a mystery.
We walk, and there are occasions when it's like you can't help it, but we're all like flirting with death sometimes a little bit, or danger. You just want to go to the edge and get a little bit closer and see what's happening over there and so on. So I'm not implying anything, but you know, slippery soil, a loose rock, this kind of thing. Anything can happen. It's not like you're just walking on a plane and you always have your safety rope around your waist and you're always safe because health and safety cares for you and these kind of things. No, it's your own decision. You go where you want to go. You are walking on your path. That is your negotiation with yourself and maybe with the others, but foremost you're responsible for yourself. If you lose the deal, you lose the deal, tough shit. There's nothing that you can do. That's cause and effect. It's just a consequence. And that's all I've got to say.
I think he got too close to the edge, and I think that the ocean took him.
After Berryhead, there were a couple of threads that went up on some of the forums that we'd been using around the time of Oslo. They were suggesting that Donald Finch and Anton Vegas had conspired to kidnap H and conduct some kind of ritual sacrifice to murder him, to gain his power. I think it's a load of bollocks. You know, I think it's an open case. It's like, the idea that he was murdered is ridiculous. I don't believe that for a minute, but at the same time, the other question is, why would he fake his own death? That's selfish. I mean, what would be the reason for doing that? So I don't have the answer.
We can't be certain of anything. That's the point. We live in uncertainty.
I don't think anybody knows where Anton is. I'm not entirely sure, most of the time, whether Anton knows where he is, because he doesn't decide to go to a place. He doesn't pick a place and go to it, and then he knows that he's there. When he goes, he's off. He could be anywhere in the world, or he could be next door. He's that sort of person. He's one of these people who, the question of where he is redundant. The question of why he is might be interesting. The question of what he is, probably more so. But where he is,
So hey, how would you go? I mean, I'd like to try and track him down. How would you suggest I go about that?
well, you could look next door. It's as good a place as any. You could start there. You've got your work cut out for you, I think, if you want to track him down. I mean, you could narrow it down to this planet, perhaps. I'm sorry I can't be more helpful. But like I say, if I knew, I'd find him.
Would you? What?
Well, who wouldn't walk with Bob?
Why should I know how to find him?
So there's no place you would suggest that where to begin?
Begin where you are, here. That's always the best place.
Mr. Sprout, Clive Austin.
Clive.
Hi, thanks for coming.
Yeah, thank you for coming alone. So, is this about Howard? About finding out about Howard?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. Well, what is it that you'd like to know?
Well, clearly that from my research,
Yeah.
it's clear that the last person to see Howard alive was Anton Vegas, and I'm trying to find Anton Vegas for that reason.
And you think that I might know something? From.
Well, yes. I mean, I realise that it's a long. I mean, I don't know the last time you saw him. Obviously, there are. I know that there were periods with the 9 where you all met up and walked occasionally.
Yeah.
And I know that your connection with Anton goes probably the furthest back than any of the others, anyone else living. So I'm just wondering if you...
Okay, all right. Look, I'm still in touch with people, there's still, I've got a network of people, and there is a rumour going around at the moment. So, I can tell you what that rumour is, and I don't know if it's going to help you or not, but I'll tell you if that helps you. It's a rumour, okay?
Yeah.
You want to know that?
Yes, please.
Okay. Well, the rumour going around that I've heard is that Anton is going to be in England this summer. That's
Okay.
it. That's it. That's all I've heard. I can't.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that.
Well, I don't know if...
Do you know where he is now?
I'm not sure that you appreciate how big that is. To even know that much at this point is a lot, you know. No, I don't know where he is now, and you know, and that's what I can give you, Clive. You know.
Okay.
I mean, it's more than, you know, like, I mean, I want to know about Howard as well, so that's why I'm giving you this. You know, I want to know what happened. I don't think you're going to get to Anton this way, you know. I don't think you're going to... He's not the sort of man you can just interview, you know. And he's very unpredictable. That's the nature of this. I mean, there's the whole engagement is about unpredictability and not knowing. So he's not going to just stand in front of you and tell you a whole lot of stuff.
If I surprised him, I mean, I realise if he's not going to give me a formal interview, is there any chance? I mean, if I say ambush is too strong a word, but
Clive, I don't think you're quite getting it. I mean, the idea that you can surprise or ambush someone who lives in a bubble of unpredictability, travels in an almost the orb, the aura, if you like, that surrounds Anton is unpredictability. So I don't want to surprise him. You can't ambush someone who doesn't know what's going to happen next and takes that as their raison d'etre, their reason. That's the whole point.
We can't be certain of anything. That's the point. We live in uncertainty.
okay, so it's 7:30 on Saturday morning. We're heading to Exeter. We've had a tip-off from Jack Sprout this morning, very early morning phone call, saying that he believes he knows where Anton Vegas will be walking today. He's been spotted in Exeter over the last couple of days, and he is working on a hunch, so he tells us that he's going to be around the Quayside area, so that's where we're heading now. He has said that there is a possibility we'll be able to talk to him if we confront him, if he doesn't get wind of us. So we have to be really careful about how we go about this. We have to be really, we have to be a bit cunning. I think we're going to have to split up. If you're happy to go double back around the streets behind us and see if there's a way across the canal further back, and if you spot him, just call us, but keep a distance, okay? If you give me the camera, yeah, I'll take that. Well, let's try back over on the other side. Right, okay, hold it. I think that's them. That's him.
but they're coming down this way towards the double lock, so just keep a safe distance.
Can you see how many there are?
Can you see how many there are? Yeah.
10. Same number as before. You can probably see them through the gap there. What are they doing?
Looks like they're trying to push it over.
They're moving again. Just stay back there for a second. They're obviously heading down that way. We need to work out which way to go. He's just looking back this way. But they're not following that road. They're carrying on by the river. And there's a bridge down there. Let's go for the bridge. They're walking on the other side of the river. So looks like some sort of drainage overflow system. They cross over there. Okay, I can see them up ahead. They're on their way back to the Port Royal. Go up on the other side of the bridge. We're just waiting on this on the bridge across the storm area. There's a bridge over here. We don't want to be crossing it if he's going to see us.
No.
Right, let's get across quick.
No, it's locked.
Let's have a quick look down here. No, not down there. Excuse me, we're looking for a group of walkers. I think they would have come this way. There's about 10 of them, led by a man with white hair in a blue shirt.
I saw a group like that over the other side, back over the bouncy bridge.
On the other side?
On the other side, back up the canalway.
Right, okay. Thank you very much.
That's perfectly all right.
Thanks.
Where have you gone? Check they're not up there. That's them. Up there by the...
Oh yeah.
This way, left. I'll check left, you go right. Okay. You know, I've got a feeling they've got all the way back. They're heading back to where they started from. We still had no word from Kathy.
No, I left another message which hasn't gone back yet. I think her phone must be on the blink. There, on the bridge.
We got one chance to get him.
I think I was
There he is. Anton! Anton, we just want to talk. Can we talk? I lost him.
End of final message.
There's a lot of people who have been wanting to know what happened to you. A lot of them think that you died on Berry Head.
It came as an enormous surprise to me that I was considered a missing person. I just assumed that Anton would have told everybody where I'd gone. I guess he was trying to find out what would happen to the group, to the 9, if he was taken out of the equation.
If he was taken out of the equation?
Or if I was taken out of the equation and he. If he didn't participate and if I didn't participate, what would happen to all of us?
So you believe that the group was held together because of you and Anton?
Gosh, I don't know. I don't know, Clive. I don't know what Anton was thinking. I remember at the time, it was in the summer of 2001. The group had been walking down and eventually we came to Brixham. We camped out close to Bury Head. And at night time, I suggested we went for a walk. And about 2 o'clock in the morning, Anton and I were standing right at the edge of the peninsula. It was pitch dark. We were listening to the waves. And he said, at the time, if you want to find him, then walk east. I guess he must have known. That I was searching for his teacher. I remember him speaking about very few people. And he'd mentioned Mr. Sharp very early on in our relationship. At the time, it'd been so early, it didn't seem significant. Now I look back and clearly it was. At the time, it didn't seem so. It wasn't until I got to Oslo with Lena. I thought if there's one person who knows who taught Anton, other than Don, it would be Lena. She denied it at first, and I challenged her about it. She lost it with me. Didn't speak to me for a couple of days. But it's the last thing that she said to me that really stuck. She said, Anton doesn't speak about people from his past. It was then that I knew. It was great being with Anton. You learn things, you really learn things. But at the time, I guess I was impatient, and I didn't realise that what with the 7-dimensional thing, I was learning stuff. It just didn't seem so. I was impatient, and I wanted to learn too. I wanted to have a teacher.
You didn't feel that Anton was that teacher?
I thought we were learning, but I didn't realise what we were learning. I was impatient. I wanted to know. And so I thought, well, I need to find out.
So, I mean, you'll have to forgive me if I appear confrontational in any way, but I do find it hard to believe that you didn't hear anything about. I mean, it was reported on national news that a walker had gone missing from Bury Head. I mean, were you just so abstracted from other human contact that you just didn't notice what was going on in the world around you? I mean, forgive me if that sounds. It doesn't. I don't want that to sound insulting. Because I realised that when, from what I understand of the other members of the group that I've interviewed, that you kind of enter into another state of reality in a way. But is it so? It seems incredulous that you wouldn't have recognised it at all.
It didn't seem significant at the time. When I took the walk east to the South Downs, I was following my path, and often as a group we had an intuition that we needed to walk, and we'd follow that, but it happened to the group. At this point, it happened to me, and so I followed it. I think it's in life it's okay to compromise over the little things, but if you compromise over the big things, then you lose the purpose for living, don't you? That's how it seems. That's how it seemed at the time. I thought if I stop off and say goodbye to the others, or even collect any of my things, actually, somebody might want to follow me. You know, somebody might want to come with me, and I didn't want that. This was my intuition. This was my role, my task.
And then, so inevitably, you just assumed that Anton would have told the others.
Yeah.
So when was the first you heard about your presumed death or your disappearance?
It was when I heard about you, actually. That you were doing this documentary about the 9 and about me missing. But I decided to come forward. So this is my opportunity to say no, I'm not dead. Here I am. And this is what happened. With Anton, sorry, I'm going back to the past again. I'm not talking about that period of time, but with Anton and Mr. Sharp, they don't teach you things. They create spaces in which you can learn things. And so just by being with them, you find out about yourself and about the world and about other people. They create the kind of space in which you can do that. And people are attracted to Anton and Mr. Sharp as well. And they stay with them for a period of time, it seems, and then they leave as better people than they arrived. It's like walking at night with a torch, and you shine the torch and you pick up different parts of the landscape, and with those different images you can piece together a picture of the world. With Mr. Sharp, it's like he turns on his torch and the whole scene is flood lit. It's the same torch. You can just get more light out of it. And so that period of time, that next 11 years, was that, really. It was learning to get more light out of my torch, if you like, to see a picture of the world. So in terms of events, is that, I don't know. What I did isn't so important as what I learned about Mr. Sharp, about myself, about the world, and I suppose ultimately, consequently, what I became, what I am.
So he took you on as a student?
He let me learn from him. Yeah, he created that space for me. Whether I was a student or not, I don't know if I could describe the relationship like that. Certainly, he was my mentor. I viewed him in that way. But in terms of kind of a traditional teacher-student relationship, I don't know. Mr. Sharp was so far beyond that. Being with him, having my perceptions illuminated in the way that they were. Yeah.
He sounds like a very interesting man.
Yeah, he is. He's something else.
Would there be any way that, how might I meet him? Would I be able to meet him, do you think?
Gosh, Clive, you'd have to be willing to be found by him. He's not the kind of man you can find. That's how it seems to me. Maybe if you took yourself to the South Downs and were willing to be found, then I don't know. I mean, that's how I met him.
Okay. Yeah. So is there anything else you'd like to add?
I think maybe just to follow your path. Just follow your path. And I think that's it.
How funny. Hello.
Clive Austin.
Yes.
I'm Mr. Sharp.
Okay,